You are 11 days into a winter with no food left. The animals have moved on. The last of the dried meat ran out 4 days ago. Your children haven't stopped crying, and then they've gone quiet, and that's worse. Somewhere near you, someone has just died, and you are looking at them, and your mind is doing something it was never supposed to have to do. This isn't a hypothetical. Forensic archaeologists have found direct physical proof of this exact scenario at sites on 4 different continents. Cut marks on human bones, skulls carved into cups, marrow scraped out of human thigh bones the same way it was scraped out of antelope bones. So why did it happen? And here's the part that matters before we go any further. It wasn't ancient humans, plural, all of them, everywhere. It was specific groups, in specific moments, for reasons that fall into 3 very different categories. And once you see the 3 categories, the whole thing stops looking like savagery and starts looking like something far more precise. This is the eclipse, and this is the part of the past nobody wants to look at directly. The first category is the one your brain probably already guessed, starvation. And the clearest proof of it isn't even prehistoric, it's shockingly recent. In 2012, forensic anthropologist Douglas Owsley examined a skull at the Jamestown colony in Virginia, dated to the brutal winter of 1609, a period colonists themselves called the starving time. The skull belonged to a 14-year-old girl, and it carried precise, hesitant cut marks, the kind made by someone who had never done this before and was doing it carefully, methodically out of the last available option. Owsley's conclusion was blunt: survival cannibalism, driven by absolute famine, in a colony where roughly 80% of the population died that winter. Now wind back much further. At Gough's cave in England, bones dated to roughly 14,700 years ago show the same signature, but with a twist. Skulls meticulously cleaned and shaped into cups, long bones cracked open exactly like the animal bones found in the same layer. Researchers at the Natural History Museum in London, led by Sylvia Bello, confirmed in a 2011 study that this wasn't rushed or desperate. It looked deliberate, which tells us starvation alone doesn't explain everything. Sometimes the same act meant something else entirely. That's where the second category comes in, and it's the one most people have never heard of. In the highlands of Papua New Guinea, the Fore people practiced something called endo-cannibalism, not eating enemies, but eating their own dead, as an act of grief and respect. Women would prepare the bodies of deceased relatives and consume small amounts of tissue, believing it kept the person's spirit within the family, rather than letting it decay alone in the ground. But something started killing the Fore in the 1950s. Women and children were dying from a horrifying, mysterious illness that made their bodies shake uncontrollably. Virologist Daniel Carlton Gajdusek spent years investigating, and what he found won him the Nobel Prize in 1976. The illness, called kuru, was a prion disease, a misfolded protein passed directly through consuming infected brain tissue. The funerary ritual, meant to honor the dead, was, without anyone knowing it, transmitting the disease through the very people performing it. Once the practice stopped, kuru disappeared within a generation. And here's where this connects to you directly, right now, whether you've ever thought about it or not. Prion diseases are still with us. Variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, the human version of mad cow disease, works through the exact same mechanism Gajdusek uncovered in a New Guinea village 70 years ago. The Fore didn't just teach us about grief rituals. They accidentally taught modern medicine how an entire category of disease works. The third category is the coldest one, and it has nothing to do with love or hunger. At El Sidrón cave in northern Spain, researchers led by Antonio Rosas found the remains of 12 Neanderthals, roughly 49,000 years old, all showing identical cut marks and deliberately fractured long bones. Evidence published in a 2006 study confirmed with genetic analysis by Carles Laliwesa Fox. And further back still, at Gran Dolina in Atapuerca, Spain, bones belonging to Homo antecessor, dated to roughly 800,000 years ago, among the oldest human remains in Europe, show butchery marks indistinguishable from how the same layer's deer bones were processed. Archaeologist Eudald Carbonell's team concluded this wasn't ritual, and it likely wasn't famine either. The bones show signs consistent with using rival groups as a food source, competitors, eliminated and consumed, the same way you'd treat any other resource in your territory. If that sounds cold, remember what we've covered before about your ancestors' diet: the marrow, the rotten meat, the insects. Nothing went to waste for most of human history. For some groups, in some moments, that logic didn't stop at the edge of the species. So let's be exact about what the evidence actually shows, because this matters. Across the entire fossil and archaeological record, confirmed cannibalism sites are rare, a small number of locations out of thousands of excavated human and hominin sites spanning hundreds of thousands of years. This was not the default human condition. It was not constant, and it was not universal. It happened in specific populations, under specific pressures: starvation with no other option, grief rituals that predated any understanding of disease, and territorial violence between competing groups. 3 very different triggers, producing the same physical evidence, thousands of years and thousands of miles apart. If you want to see exactly how deep this, your body still remembers everything, pattern goes, I've gone further into it in the video on what your ancestors actually ate. Comment marrow, and I'll make sure you see it. Here's the uncomfortable truth underneath all 3 categories. None of this happened because ancient humans were less human than you. It happened because the line between love, survival, and violence is thinner than any of us like to admit, and every one of us is still standing exactly exactly one bad winter away from finding out which side of it we're on. We just haven't had to find out yet.